Olivia Lane didn't expect her Tuesday to start with a stranger in a three-piece suit staring hopelessly at a bucket of daisies like it held the secrets to the universe. She paused mid-step inside Bloom and Vine, her apron still dusted with soil from the greenhouse out back. The man stood in the middle of the shop, tall, clean-cut, and completely out of place. He held a single tulip like it might explode. "I don't think that flower's your answer," Olivia said, stepping closer. He looked up, startled. His eyes were a sharp, steely blue, and for a second he just blinked at her like she'd spoken another language. Then he laughed, low and warm. "You'd be right. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Who's it for?" she asked, gently taking the tulip from his hand and placing it back in the bucket. "A woman," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "She's important, girlfriend, mom, boss," he hesitated. "Not exactly she's someone I need to impress." "Well, tulips aren't really impress me flowers." "They say I panicked and grabbed the first thing I recognized." Olivia smiled, walking toward the roses. "These are bold, confident, say what you mean without apologizing for it." "And what do they say?" he asked, following her. "Depends on the color." She pulled out a single deep red rose and handed it to him. "This one says I'm serious." He looked at the flower, then back at her. "And what if I'm not sure what I want to say yet?" "Then maybe you shouldn't be buying flowers," she said, only half kidding. The man laughed again, and this time it reached his eyes. "Fair point, but I think I want to figure it out." He looked at her like he meant more than just the flowers, but Olivia didn't have time to dwell on it. "I'm Olivia." "Zayden," he said, shaking her hand. His grip was warm, firm. There was a quiet beat between them before she cleared her throat. "You want me to help you put something together?" He nodded. "Please." They spent the next 15 minutes choosing an elegant arrangement: white gardenias, pale peonies, and just one red rose in the center. Zayden asked questions, listened carefully, and even made her laugh twice. He didn't act like rich men usually did when they wandered into the shop like they were too important to be there. He was different. When she finished tying the ribbon around the bouquet, he pulled out a black card that looked heavy enough to slice glass. Her brows lifted. "You sure this isn't too much?" "I'm sure," Zayden said. "You have no idea how helpful you've been." She gave a small laugh. "It's just flowers." "No, it's not." He paused, watching her. "I'm new in town. Think you'd let me bring you coffee next time I need flower advice?" Olivia blinked. "You want to buy me coffee, unless you have a rule against caffeine and charming strangers." "I don't. But I also don't usually go out with customers." "I'm not really your customer," he said, grinning. "I'm just a confused guy who wandered into your shop." Something about the way he said it made her heart beat a little faster. Against every logical part of her brain, she nodded. "All right." "Coffee?" He smiled like he'd just sealed a deal. "It's a date." He left with the flowers, and Olivia stood frozen behind the counter, still holding the ribbon roll. She had no idea that Zayden Fox was the youngest billionaire real estate mogul on the East Coast, or that he wasn't giving those flowers to anyone at all. He just needed a reason to see her again. 2 days later, he returned. No flowers this time, just a coffee cup and that same disarming smile. "I owe you," he said, handing her the cup. She took it, surprised. "You remembered my order." "I remember a lot about you," he said easily, leaning on the counter. Olivia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "So, how'd it go?" "Did the mystery woman like the flowers?" "There was no woman," he admitted, shrugging. "I lied." "You what?" "I just wanted to talk to you. And I figured asking for flower advice was more subtle than high. I saw you through the window and panicked." She laughed, actually laughed. "That's ridiculous." "Yeah, but it worked. Barely." "But now you're smiling," he said, and something about the way he looked at her made her forget every reason she'd told herself not to get involved with someone like him. Zayden started coming by the shop almost every day after that. Sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but that crooked smile. He asked questions about her greenhouse, about her life, her family. He listened, really listened. And slowly, Olivia let herself get pulled in, but what she didn't know, what he hadn't told her, was that he wasn't just some guy. He owned half the buildings on Fifth Avenue. His face had been on the cover of Forbes last year, and he wasn't just falling for her, he already had. Zayden stood on the balcony of his penthouse that night, staring down at the city lights. His assistant, Simone, was rattling off details about a development deal, but he barely heard her. "Put the Hamilton project on hold," he said suddenly. Simone blinked. "What, Zayden, that's a $200 million, I don't care, I need time here, something's different?" Simone narrowed her eyes. "This isn't about the florist, is it?" He didn't answer. "Oh my God, it is. Zayden, you've known her for a week." "She doesn't know who I am," he said quietly. "She likes me without the name, without the money. I can breathe when I'm with her." Simone's voice softened. "And what happens when she finds out who you are?" Zayden looked down at the coffee cup in his hand, the one Olivia had touched earlier that day. He didn't know, but he was already in too deep to walk away. Olivia didn't see Zayden for 3 days, and though she tried not to think about it, she caught herself glancing at the door each time the bell above it chimed. She told herself it didn't matter. He was a stranger with a nice face, and a good sense of timing, not someone who should be occupying space in her mind while she was elbow-deep in soil and invoices. But on the 4th morning, he walked in just as she was restocking the eucalyptus buckets, holding 2 pastries in a paper bag. "I brought peace offerings," he said, lifting the bag slightly. "1 almond croissant, 1 mystery item." Olivia stood, brushing her hands on her jeans. "You're assuming I'm the kind of person who accepts edible bribes." He tilted his head. "You're not." She took the bag from him, peeking inside. "Depends on the mystery item. Raspberry Danish. Then you're safe for now." Zayden leaned against the edge of the counter, watching her unwrap the croissant. "You're hard to read." "Good," she said, taking a bite. "That's how I like it." He smiled, but this time there was a hesitation behind it. "I was out of town, brief trip, didn't mean to vanish." "You don't owe me explanations," Olivia said, even though some part of her had been waiting to hear why he disappeared. "I wanted to tell you anyway," he said. It wasn't the same not being here. A flush crept up the back of her neck, and she focused on brushing crumbs off the paper napkin. "So what now?" "More fake flower emergencies. Actually," he said, reaching into his coat pocket, "I was hoping you'd help me plan something real." He unfolded a sketch. It wasn't detailed, but it showed a rooftop space, bare planters, string lights, and what looked like an arch at the far end. "I'm hosting a fundraiser in a few weeks," he explained. "It's for a children's arts program. I'm on the board. I want to turn the rooftop into something memorable. Elegant, warm, not overdone. Think you can help?" Olivia blinked, taking the paper from him. "You want me to design a rooftop garden? More like a temporary floral installation. You'd have full creative control, budgets flexible. Why me?" "Because you see things differently. You don't just arrange flowers, you tell stories with them." She looked at him, surprised. "That's a lot to assume from a guy who's only bought flowers once." "Sometimes once is enough," he said. She studied the sketch again, then slowly nodded. "I'd need access to the space this week. And I'll want to approve the container specs before anything's ordered." Zayden's expression shifted, still calm but sharper. "Done. I'll have my assistant get you clearance." "Assistant?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. He paused. "Simone, she handles scheduling. I run a few projects." Olivia didn't press further, but a flicker of curiosity sparked in her chest. He hadn't said what kind of projects, and his suit charcoal, tailored so well it looked effortless, definitely didn't come from anyone who lived paycheck to paycheck. Still, she nodded. "All right. I'm in." Later that afternoon, Zayden watched from behind a tinted car window as Olivia locked up the shop. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, then pulled her phone from her pocket and started down the sidewalk. "Send the specs to her by morning," he told Simone, who sat in the front passenger seat tapping away on a sleek tablet. "She'll ask questions," Simone said without looking up. "I'm not hiding anything." "You're not telling her anything either." Zayden exhaled slowly. "I want her to fall for me." "Not the headlines." Simone finally turned. "You're building a rooftop garden to impress a woman who doesn't know your last name." "I'm giving her a canvas," he said. "That's different." She's going to find out eventually. I know, but not like this. Not before she sees who I really am. Across the street, Olivia reached the crosswalk and disappeared into the crowd. The next morning, she arrived at the rooftop with a clipboard and a ponytail, only to find a man in a pressed vest already waiting by the elevators. "You must be Miss Lane," he said. "Mr. Fox said to expect you. He'll be arriving shortly." "Fox," she repeated, eyebrows rising. "Yes, ma'am, he owns this building." Olivia froze. "He what?" The man gestured toward the double doors. "Right this way." The rooftop was bigger than she expected. Paved in pale slate and framed by glass railings, it offered a sweeping view of the skyline. Sunlight glinted off distant towers. She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in when the doors behind her opened again. Zayden stepped out, his coat over one arm, sleeves rolled up. "Thought I'd be here first." Olivia didn't answer right away. "You own this place." He stopped a few steps away. "I do." "So when you said you ran a few projects, I undersold it." She crossed her arms. "That's one way to put it," he nodded, his jaw tight. "I didn't want to lie. I just didn't want to lead with the part that makes people treat me differently." "And what part is that exactly?" "The skyscrapers, the designer suits, the fact that you apparently have an assistant named Simone who arranges your life." Zayden held her gaze. "The part where people stop seeing me and start seeing dollar signs." The rooftop fell quiet for a beat. "I don't care about your bank account," Olivia said finally, "but I do care about honesty." "You're right," he said. "I should have told you sooner." She looked at the clipboard in her hand, then back at the view. "I'm still doing the garden, but I'm going to need all the facts up front from now on." "Deal," he said softly. As she turned to walk the perimeter, measuring light angles and planter space, Zayden didn't follow. He watched her instead, this woman who saw through pretense without even trying. He wasn't used to that, and for the first time since stepping into her flower shop, he realized something dangerous. He didn't just want her attention anymore, he wanted all of her. Olivia stood at the edge of the rooftop, a pencil tucked behind one ear, measuring tape dangling from one hand, and an unusual tightness in her chest. The city stretched out beneath her, glittering and alive, but all she could focus on was the man leaning casually against the railing behind her, watching her like she was the only thing in view. She didn't like being blindsided. Not in business, not in life. And certainly not by the kind of man who could buy a Manhattan skyline and still pretend he needed help picking out flowers. "I requested a crane drop for the larger planters," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Deliveries being scheduled for Tuesday at dawn. I'll need someone from your team here to sign off." Zayden nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll be here." "You," her eyebrows lifted. "Don't you have real estate empires to manage?" "I have priorities," he said. "Right now, this is one." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began sketching out placement zones along the tiles with chalk. She didn't want to admit that hearing he'd be here again sent a bolt of electricity straight through her spine. "I looked you up," she said after a long moment, not looking at him. "Last night." He stepped closer, the space between them shrinking. "And I saw enough to realize I've been designing a garden for the same man who just bought the West End Theater." Zayden didn't flinch. "I'm assuming that's not a compliment. You don't even like musicals." He tilted his head. "You asked me that?" "No, but if you did, you would have said no. You strike me as the type who leaves during intermission." That pulled the corner of his mouth upward. "I did once. Got dragged to a 3-hour operetta in Prague, never recovered." Olivia stared at him for a beat, then shook her head. "You're impossible." "I'm honest, now anyway." She moved to one of the planter boxes, testing its weight. "You're something, that's for sure." Zayden crouched beside her, his tone shifting. "I get why you're guarded, but if I wanted something from you, I would have made it happen weeks ago." "I'm not worried about you wanting something," she said quietly. "I'm worried about what happens when you get it." His gaze dropped to her hands, still braced against the metal edge, and then back to her face. "You think I'm playing a game?" "I think people like you always are. You walk into people's lives like you're doing them a favor." And when it stops being convenient, you walk right back out. I've never walked out on something real. Olivia's throat tightened, but she didn't respond. She stood, brushing off her jeans, then crossed to her clipboard again. I need to confirm lighting installation by Friday, she said. And I need access to the storage room on the south side. It's locked. I'll make sure you have a key, he said, voice low. She scribbled a few notes, then added without looking up, you'll need to decide what kind of statement piece you want at the arch. It's the focal point of the whole space. Zayden didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter than before. I was thinking something personal. Olivia glanced up. Like, I don't know yet, he admitted, but something that means something. Not just decoration. She tapped her pencil against her clipboard, hesitating. I can show you a few options. You can choose. He nodded. And what about you? What about me? What do you want from this? I want my work to speak for itself. I wasn't talking about the garden. She looked up slowly, her eyes narrowing. Don't do that. Do what? Make this into something it isn't. Zayden stepped closer, his voice steady. You're right. I don't know what this is yet, but I know how I feel when I see you, when I hear your voice. When you argue with me about plantar dimensions like you'd fight a war for the right shade of peony. Olivia's breath caught. She hated how easily he could unravel her defenses with words like that. I don't have space for distractions right now, she said. This isn't a game to me. Then don't treat it like one, he said gently. Let it be what it is. Real? She looked down at the clipboard again, her fingers tightening around the edge. I came up here to build something beautiful. Let's focus on that. He didn't argue. Instead, he stepped back, giving her space, the weight of his gaze still lingering. The following days were a blur of movement. Olivia threw herself into the rooftop transformation with a precision she hadn't tapped into in years. Each morning, she arrived before sunrise, and every evening she left just as the last light bled from the sky. Zayden was there more often than she expected, sometimes helping, sometimes just watching, always quiet when she needed him to be. One night, after a particularly long day of arranging suspended glass lanterns, Olivia found herself alone on the rooftop with him again. The city was hushed beneath them, and the sky above was a velvet sheet pierced with stars. She leaned against the railing, arms crossed. You know, I've never done anything like this before. Designed a rooftop? No, let someone like you into my life. Even on the edges. Zayden didn't move closer, but his voice carried across the space between them. Why now? I don't know. Maybe I got tired of keeping the door locked all the time. He looked at her like he heard every word she hadn't said. I've never let anyone design something like this for me, he said. Not just the space, the feeling. She glanced at him. You're not used to standing still, are you? No, he said simply. But with you, I don't want to keep running. Olivia swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the glowing lanterns overhead. You ever think maybe we're just too different? Every day, he said. And every day I hope we're not. She didn't say anything after that, but she didn't leave either. And when he walked her to her car that night, neither of them spoke a word. But he opened the door for her, waited until her headlights disappeared down the street, and then stood in the quiet, looking up at the rooftop they'd built together. He was falling in love with her. And he didn't know how to stop it. But what he didn't realize was that someone else had been watching from the far end of the rooftop as well. Simone stepped from behind the access door, her phone still in her hand, a faint crease between her brows. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But what she'd just heard changed everything. The rooftop was finished. Everything Olivia had envisioned: woven trellises wrapped in blooming clematis, floating candles suspended from custom ironwork, a trailing arch of ivory hydrangeas and wisteria that framed the skyline like a dream, had come to life in a way that made her chest tighten when she stepped back and saw it all assembled. But it wasn't the flowers that made her breath catch. It was the way Zayden stood in the center of it all, dressed in a midnight suit with his sleeves buttoned for once, holding a bouquet she hadn't made. She froze 2 steps from the rooftop entrance. That's bold, she said. He turned slowly, then smiled, not the easy, flirtatious one she'd gotten used to, but something quieter, more certain. I figured tonight should start with flowers, he said. She walked toward him slowly, her heels clicking against the slate. Are they for the guests? He shook his head once. Just for you. She took them from his hands. Pale lilacs and blue thistle, edged with white ranunculus, delicate, unexpected, and not a single flower she'd used in the rest of the rooftop. You remembered what I told you about color theory, she said, surprised. I remembered everything you've said to me. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city floated up from below, car horns, faint music, the murmur of voices from the street. Then Olivia glanced toward the far corner where guests in sleek gowns and polished tuxedos had begun to arrive. You should be over there. You're the host. I will be, he said. But not before I say this. She looked up at him, bouquet still in her hands. I never planned on any of this, Zayden said. Not the flowers, not the rooftop, not you. I walked into your shop because it looked quiet and I needed quiet that day. But I stayed because you didn't care who I was. You told me the truth when no one else would. You looked at me like I was just a man, not a brand, not a portfolio. I didn't know you, she said softly. You still don't know all of it, he admitted. But I want to show you all of it if you'll let me. She stepped closer, her voice low. And what happens when this night ends? I'll still want to see you tomorrow, he said, and the next day, and the day after that. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly around the bouquet. You're not the only one who didn't plan this, he waited. I didn't expect someone like you to pull me out of my routine, she said. I didn't expect someone with a skyline for a backyard to notice the way I arrange ferns between gardenias, but you did. Zayden leaned down just enough to brush his lips against her cheek. Because it matters to you. So it matters to me. She exhaled slowly, then tilted her head toward the crowd. They're waiting. They can wait a little longer. No, they can't, came a voice from behind. Simone appeared from the stairwell, her heels sharp against the stone. She approached with composed urgency, but her expression was unreadable. Zayden straightened. What is it? She stopped just short of them. There's a development you need to see, something surfaced an hour ago. Olivia's gaze flicked between them. What kind of development? Simone hesitated. It's about your father's estate. Zayden's entire demeanor shifted, his shoulders tightened, his jaw clenched, but his voice remained calm. Now isn't the time. It should be, Simone said, because the press got wind of it and they're looking for a comment. Olivia stepped back. You should go, he looked at her. I don't want to, I know, she said. But you have to. He didn't move for a second. Then he handed her something small from his jacket pocket, a pendant on a silver chain. A tiny pressed flower was sealed in the glass. It was my mother's, he said. She gave it to me before she passed. Olivia stared at it. She used to say the smallest things hold the most weight, he continued. I want you to have it. Her fingers closed around it before she could stop herself. I'll be here when you get back. Those words hung between them as he turned and followed Simone. The next day, Bloom and Vine was quiet. Olivia stood behind the counter, her fingers brushing the pendant at her neck when the bell above the door jingled. She looked up. Zayden stepped inside, no suit, no coat, just a soft gray sweater and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept. In his hand was a single stem of forget-me-not. I had to give a press statement, he said. They twisted it, as usual. I saw, she said. I didn't read past the headline. He came closer, placing the flower on the counter. I told them I wouldn't be commenting further, that my focus has shifted. She watched him. To what? She asked. To you, he said. She didn't move. You sure about that? I've never been more sure. Olivia reached across the counter, took the flower, and then stepped around it until they stood face to face. I don't need gifts, she said, or promises you can't keep. You'll get neither, he said. Only what's real. She nodded once, slowly. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It wasn't a rushed kiss or a hesitant one. It was the kind that came after every wall had been stripped away. When she pulled back, she whispered, "Then don't make me regret it." "You won't," he said. Later that week, the rooftop they'd built together hosted a second event, just a dozen chairs, a few soft lights, and no press in sight. Olivia wore a simple dress with wildflowers stitched along the hem. Zayden stood beside her in the quiet, sunlight slipping through the leaves. There was no crowd, no headlines, just them. She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You still think flowers can't say what you mean?" He smiled, then pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Not anymore." The first snowfall came early that year, blanketing the city in a quiet hush that seemed to soften even the sharpest corners of the skyline. Olivia stood by the window of her apartment, her fingers wrapped around a mug of cinnamon tea. Watching the flakes spiral past the glass like ash from a paper, she was finally ready to stop reading. Behind her, Zayden was scribbling something inside a leather journal. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his long legs stretched out on her couch, socks mismatched, tie discarded hours ago. A half-empty takeout container sat on the coffee table between them, the remnants of dinner from a tiny Korean place he'd insisted she try. She watched him for a moment before speaking. "What are you writing?" He didn't look up. "A proposal." Her heart stopped. "A what?" "For the children's program," he said, glancing at her with a grin. "Relax." "Not that kind of proposal." She set her tea down and walked over, peeking over his shoulder. "You're still working on that?" "I want to expand it. Nationwide. Partner with schools that have lost their arts budgets. The rooftop project raised more than we expected. I figured we could use the momentum." "You're not getting out of this," he said, nudging her knee. "You're part of it now." Olivia sat beside him, folding her legs underneath her. "You ever stop chasing the next big thing?" He closed the journal and turned toward her. "I used to do it so I wouldn't have to sit still. But lately, you're learning how to be still," she finished for him. "I'm learning how to want different things." He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "If you hadn't challenged me at every turn, I might still be running in circles." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "So I'm your compass now? More like the person who made me realize I was facing the wrong direction." They sat in silence for a long while, the snow thickening outside, the city dimming under its weight. Olivia's apartment was filled with small signs of shared life, his cufflinks forgotten on the counter, her scarf draped over the back of his chair, a half-read novel he'd picked up because she wouldn't stop quoting it. It wasn't loud or public or grand, but it was real. "You never told me what happened with the estate," she said quietly, not looking at him. He let out a breath. "It was a mess. My father left behind layers of unresolved investments, but I didn't fight it. Why not? Because I realized I don't care about legacy the way he did. I care about what I build with my own hands, not what someone else left behind." She looked up at him. "And what are you building now?" He kissed her forehead gently before answering. "Something that lasts." The next week, they visited a local school together. Olivia carried a binder filled with sketches, and Zayden brought a drafted sponsorship proposal. The children's laughter echoed through the hallway as they walked toward the art room, where a dozen kids were elbow-deep in paint and glitter. A girl with paint smeared across her cheek ran up to Olivia. "Are you the flower lady?" Olivia laughed. "I guess I am." Zayden watched her interact with the students, his arms loosely crossed, his smile soft and unguarded. When Olivia glanced back at him, he mouthed something she couldn't really read. Later, in the empty hallway, she asked, "What did you say to me earlier?" He traced his thumb along her jaw. "I said I love you." This time, she didn't hesitate. "I love you too." That weekend, Olivia returned to Bloom and Vine to pick up a few things. The shop had been closed for renovations, Zayden's idea, though she'd insisted on handling every design decision herself. When she unlocked the door and stepped inside, her breath caught. The entire front of the shop had been redone, refinished floors, custom shelving, new lighting that bathed the flowers in soft golden hues. But the most striking part sat right above the counter, a hand-carved wooden sign that read, "Where it all bloomed." She turned to find him behind her, holding a small key. "This is yours," he said. "No strings, no contracts, just a gift." She stepped forward slowly. "Why?" Because this is where you built something real, and because I want you to remember that no matter what happens, you did this on your own." "You didn't have to, I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "This isn't about showing you what I can buy. It's about showing you that I see you." She looked around the shop, then back at him. "You really don't stop surprising me." He took her hand. "Good, because I have one more." She raised an eyebrow. "Does it involve more renovations?" "No," he said. "It involves a plane ticket." "To where?" He grinned. "We've been working non-stop. I thought maybe we deserved a break. Somewhere with salt in the air and nothing to do except breathe and be." She hesitated. "You're not worried about losing momentum?" He looked at her with complete clarity. "I already found what I was chasing." 3 days later, they stepped out of a private jet onto a quiet beach. The sky stretched wide and blue above them. Olivia wore a sundress she'd found buried in her closet, and Zayden had ditched the suit entirely, his shoes in his hand as they walked barefoot across the sand. They didn't need grand declarations or spotlighted stages. They had each other and the crisp scent of the ocean and the sound of waves stitching the horizon together. As they lay on a blanket beneath the stars that night, Olivia turned to him and whispered, "You know this is forever, right?" He wrapped his arm around her and pulled her close. "I was counting on it," she smiled, resting her head on his chest. "Then let's build something that never ends." And so they did, together, always.